Please welcome again Sanjay Gupta.
Wow, that was amazing.
A little bit of swing, you know. I just feel like we're leaving you out in the singing department. You want to sing a duet with me?
Oh no, nobody wants that. My wife is here.
Dr. Collins.
She doesn't want that.
He did real well.
I want to stay married.
Do it, man.
So,
Do it.
no,
Stay
you guys are great though. That was amazing, and you've given me memories to last a lifetime. Thank you very much.
You didn't say what kind of memories, but thank you anyway.
It was really amazing. You've seen a lot tonight already. Music is in and of itself a form of language. That's something I hope you've taken away from this so far. Professor Nina Kraus is going to be joined by Zakir Hussain again, who provided the soundtrack to my childhood, seemingly. And they're going to talk more about the intersection of music, language, and the healthy brain.
All right.
Hello. I'm Nina Kraus. I'm a professor at Northwestern University, a biologist. My mother was a pianist, and I grew up playing under the piano because it felt good to be under there. And I grew up in a household where more than one language was spoken. I learned Italian first. In italiano si mostra il ritmo con le mani. I don't feel as though I fit in as an Italian or an American, but I'm most comfortable across boundaries. And I feel that way scientifically as well, which is why I like to take science out of the laboratory and into schools and the gym, which I'm going to tell you about. First, there is rhythm in language. As I'm talking to you now, there is rhythm in my voice. The drums are playing it too. We are here to celebrate the power of rhythm. So we've known for a long time that kids who are good at synchronizing to a beat have better language skills. So here's a kid. Synchronizing to a beat. Here's another guy. Enthusiastic. But as a scientist, I am always asking what is going on in the brain. So you can see the sound waves, and the sound waves have rhythms. And we can measure the brain's response to sound with scalp electrodes, and we can see. Look at that red squiggly line. That's the response of the synchronizer. And you can see that the synchronizer is following the rhythms of the sound waves, whereas the non-synchronizer is not. And what is important is the fact that the synchronizer has better language skills. So tomorrow there is going to be a whole workshop on rhythm. It's called Say It With Rhythm, so be there. It'll be wonderful. Zakir will be there, and Mickey Hart and Adam Gasly. But let's think about sound and making sense of sound as a measure of brain health. Now, making sense of sound is one of the hardest jobs that we ask our brain to do. So it means that we need to process information on the order of microseconds, which is faster than neurons even fire. And so you can imagine that our experiences are going to affect this sound processing. The experiences can be making music. Making music affects sound processing in the brain, and also getting hit in the head. So a concussion can very much affect sound processing in the brain. So think of sound processing in the brain as a fabulous measure of brain health. So again, biologist, I measure sound processing in the brain, and over the years we have measured sound processing in the brain of many musicians and athletes who have sustained a concussion. So how do we even measure sound processing in the brain? Well, you have to deliver a sound wave to the ear, and then the red squiggle is the brain's response to a complex sound. Now, just as visual objects have a color, a taste, a texture, a size, so sound also has ingredients. And these ingredients are like pitch and timing and timbre. And we can see how good a job the brain does at processing these different ingredients of sound. So let's focus on pitch and timing and timbre. What's pitch? Well, pitch is how high or low a note is. Then there is timing. And timbre gives us the sound of different instruments playing the same note. So the pitch is the same, but they sound different because the harmonics are different. The timbre is different of each instrument. So we can measure sound processing in the brain, and I have to tell you that as a biologist who is used to recording from single neurons in the brain, I have been driven to try to develop ways of measuring sound processing in the brain in humans with the kind of accuracy and precision that we can find at the cellular level. And we've made some progress. So a sound wave comes in to the ear, and then we measure the electricity. And you can see that the sound wave and the brain wave physically resemble each other. In fact, so much that you can take the brain wave and play it out through a speaker, and it will sound like the sound wave. So here's the sound wave.
Da.
Here's the brain's response. So how is this even possible? How can we listen to how the brain listens? So imagine you're playing an instrument, and this is the movement of air molecules producing sound, and we're all used to the idea of translating sound waves into electricity through a microphone, and then we can play that through a speaker. We can then listen to those sound waves, and the currency of the nervous system is electricity. So with scalp electrodes, we can measure the brain's response to sound, and we now have an electrical signal which we can play through a speaker. So let me give you some examples. Sound waves and brain waves. First, you will hear a Rhodes piano playing funky music, and then you will hear the brain responding to those very notes. The brain. So we have a lot to work with. Let's hear some Beatles. First, some piano. The brain. Heart and soul, and the brain. My all-time favorite. And here is Renee. So Renee will sing a few bars of the sound of music, and the last 3 words will be the response of the brain to her voice. So we can measure the brain's response to a beautiful voice like that. I want you to hear a musically enhanced brain playing Amazing Grace. And now you will hear Amazing Grace played through a brain that has sustained a concussion. So again, we have a lot to work with to learn about sound processing in the brain and brain health. Let's talk about healthy brains. Probably the healthiest thing we can do for our brains is to make music. So, a question. Yeah. And, again, as a biologist, what is going on in the brain? So, a question that's often asked is, are musicians made or born? So, a way of looking at this is to take 2 matched groups. So, say, take a classroom of 2nd graders and match them age, sex, IQ, and how their language skills are, their sound processing in the brain, and then give one group music and another group another enrichment activity. So we've been able to do this longitudinally in 2 populations. In Chicago public schools, we've followed freshmen to their senior years, the same kids. And in Los Angeles, the Harmony Project, we followed 2nd, 3rd, and 4th graders. So, these are the same kids that we're able to follow their development of their brain activity over time. And here are some of the beautiful kids who have been part of our studies. And what we found is that the children who had music, who were given music instruction, had stronger language skills. Their reading was better. Their ability to hear speech in challenging listening environments, like a playground, was better. Their brain development was faster. And importantly, their response to sound was more accurate. So that little red splotch that you see there is the timing difference, the calculation that the brain has to do when it's comparing consonants like ba and da. Did I say bad or dad? And you can see that after 2 years of music making, there's more red, so there's a greater automatic timing difference. The brain can discriminate these sounds automatically much better, and these are not changes that we saw in the control group. Importantly, so we've been talking about pitch, timing, and timbre. The musician's signature really consists of enhancement in timing and in timbre. And what is remarkable about this is that this is the same signature that underlies language. So kids who have developmental language disorders are likely to have timing difficulties in their response to sound or difficulty processing the harmonics. You need to have timbre and timing for language. Language experience matters. So a number of years ago, studies were done showing that children whose moms had less education were likely to hear fewer words than kids whose moms had more education. And what we did is we went into high school and just took a classroom and divided the kids based on how much education their mothers had. And what we discovered was that the kids whose moms had less education had responses to sound that were less precise and strong. And importantly, they had more neural noise. So if you can imagine you're trying to make sense of sound, you can think about like you're listening to a radio and there's static in the radio, and on top of it, the announcer's voice is called muffle. So how is a child to learn? So we understand that there is a certain linguistic signature involving different ingredients of sound processing that is hampered by linguistic deprivation. And we asked, well, could music making strengthen that? And the fact is that it partially offset this effect of linguistic deprivation, showing us that music can really strengthen skills in the brain that are important for language. Importantly, it takes time to shape the brain. In both of our studies, we saw that after 1 year, we saw no changes in the brain's response to sound, but after 2 years, these changes were evident. Importantly, these changes happen, many of us play a musical instrument for some time and then stop, but that influence of music education lasts. And so as we get older, as we've learned to listen better through playing a musical instrument, if you can see the response there of a typical older brain, someone who has played music all their life, or even who has had a history of music making, will have a biological response that will resemble that of a younger brain. So, what about when things go wrong? So, concussion. Concussion can disrupt the hearing brain. And we are interested in learning more about this so that we can better inform diagnosis of concussion, when it's safe for an athlete to return to play or return to learn, back to the classroom, treatment outcomes. Here are some of the participants in our studies. We've been following the Northwestern football players for the last 2 years, and here they are getting their brain responses measured. And I show you their pictures. I think they are adorable. Again, what is going on in their brains? So what is going on is in the acute stages of concussion, so right after they've sustained a concussion within 24, 48 hours, what we see is that the disruption in sound processing is pervasive. You should know that most concussions resolve after a week. In the kids who maintain symptoms continuously, beyond that time, we see that disruptions in sound processing continue. And even in some athletes who have recovered, we see that there is a legacy of their history of concussion. So importantly, we have secured a grant from the National Institutes of Health, and we are now studying all 500 Northwestern University athletes, boys and girls, in high and low impact sports, longitudinally over 5 years, and so by next year we should have some more information. So there are very important parallels between music and physical fitness. And the idea is that this should be for every child. Think about how physical education is handled in schools. It really is just the kids who are good at sports, the kids who make varsity, who get the good coaching. But every child should be strong and flexible. This strikes a family history chord. I'm reminded of my Uncle Hans, who published work decades ago showing that children in America were less strong and flexible than their counterparts in other countries. And at that time, he was working together with the Presidential Council of Physical Fitness at that time under President Kennedy. And he was really, the idea was to develop standards of fitness for every child. And many of these ideas perished with the president. But there are parallels as we think about music education as well, because not every child is going to become a musician, and yet every child should develop musical knowledge. So I guess I would say to you, as a scientist, speaking as a scientist, the information tells us that it is important that we put our resources into music education for every child so that they can develop strong and healthy brains. So finally, we have Science Meets Art. Here is the brain keyboard, and we have recorded the brain's response to every note on the keyboard. Can you play a couple notes for us? So this is the brain's response to individual notes, and now you will hear Mark Meadows play the brain. Thank you. Thank you.